Hello and welcome to this edition of Beyond the Politics, a regular examination of the events happening right here in the Quinte region and the people who work so hard behind the scenes to make it all happen. I'm your host, Paul Martin. Joining me as always, my co-host, columnist for the Belleville Intelligencer, Colin Mackay.
Thanks, Paul.
And a very special guest for this week. The first episode of this particular month is the Mayor of Brighton, Brian Ostrander.
Glad I can join you.
Thank you. So let's talk about so much we want to get to, and of course Brighton is such a hotbed of activity lately, especially for growth and development and new projects, which we'll all be talking about. But let's talk about the state of the municipality overall. This is your first term as mayor. You've had 2 terms on council before, as we talked about. How is Brighton changing, and what is the state of the municipality in your eyes today?
So 3 terms on council.
Oh, 3 terms on council.
Yes, this is my first term as mayor, and the state of the municipality is one of growth and the impacts of that growth. We've been building houses for a long time in Brighton. The last 20 years, last 2 decades really have been a story of housing growth, and the wish is to migrate that growth into commercial industrial development for the services that the people of Brighton need, and for the employment that the new people that are coming now we're seeing also need.
Now, sometimes when you start pushing, you're doing all these things, we forget. And we talked about this beforehand, about maybe returning to doing things the right way in terms of internal staff and regional partners. What do you want to talk about there?
Well, as you know, we spent a couple of terms in what might be called chaos. Mm-hmm. We ended some pretty good economic development partnerships. We had a lot of turnover in staff, especially at the senior staffing level, and things just even around the council table were they were putting the fun in dysfunctional for a couple of terms. So I think what Brighton was looking for was someone to come along and say, okay, we're going to work together now. We're going to work with people. We're going to work with our Quinte partners and our Northumberland partners. We're going to rebuild economic development in our community, and we're not going to put up with shenanigans around the table. And that's what I've done. I've reached out. I've reached across to Belleville and Quinte West and Coburg and Port Hope and said, what can we do for each other? How do we do local government better? And I made it clear to staff, senior staff especially, that I was going to have their backs. As long as nothing unethical or illegal was happening, I'm going to have your back. So do what needs to be done to operate this municipality, and do not expect to see me interfering in the operations. I will not be at your staff meetings. I will not interfere with your hires or the people who report to you, and I don't. I spend my time working on policy and working on representing the people of Brighton.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that. I've worked in news in this area for about 30 years. I remember when half of the senior management positions in Brighton were vacant. I remember the long legal conflict with the one CAO. Has the new approach taken root? What is the morale for staff right now? Because under COVID it's been challenging, but has this new approach or this new pledge from you helped?
I think it has. We're in the midst of a bit of a concern at the moment. A couple members of council have brought some concerns forward about productivity levels and concerning they want a management review essentially, and I am concerned that the management review is not required, but maybe a look at what council members are doing in terms of interfering with staff, doing exactly what we don't want to do as members of council. We're there to pass bylaws. We're there to create policy so that our staff have their marching orders, whether it's strategic planning or policies for day-to-day operations. That's our role as council.
So how much of it do you think is politically motivated?
It's an election year.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I thought. They're just raising a ruckus because they want to get noticed.
Exactly.
Is that fair?
It's look at me politics as far as I'm concerned.
Is this a holdover from the way things were done before? Because I was glad to hear you say just now that there were a couple of terms. This was not a 1 year or a 2 year thing. There was a good period of time when many stories coming out of Brighton centered on council itself as opposed to what the council was doing. And that's never a good situation.
No, there was a lot of personality conflict, for sure. And
So are some of the latest issues, do you think, a holdover from that? Or as you said, is it just a matter of it's an election year and maybe people are trying to get noticed?
I would suggest that there is I think it's both. I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's both. Certainly there are some members of council who I think likely think they belong in operational roles and want to be more involved in what happens on the day-to-day. And that causes problems when you're not in a managerial role.
So Brian, my question would be, why didn't these two councillors knock on your door and come and see you before they raised the issue in council, or did they?
No, they did not. And they petitioned for a special meeting, which we held on Monday.
Why not keep it in-house? I like to Paul's point, you're trying to keep this.
Well, they wanted to go into a closed session to discuss this, and I laid out the reasons why. First of all,
transparency.
I didn't think the motion to go into closed session was appropriate or in order, quite frankly, and I laid out my reasoning for that. And one of the reasons I said was, you have a concern with something happening with the staffing level. Why aren't you talking to the CAO? Why aren't you sending? This meeting could have been an email. And that's never productive. If they could have sent an email to the CAO or the senior manager and received a good response.
Mm-hmm. Moving to some of the rebuilding that you talked about. Brighton's doing some new things. There's a new chamber president. Do you talk a little bit about that and what's it been like to work with them?
I've always had a good relationship with the chamber. The new president, Bobby, she and I went to high school together. So
Bobby who?
Bobby Wright. Mm-hmm. Sorry, owner of the Birdhouse in Brighton. So there you go. We'll do a little plug too. Sure. She's got some good ideas, and she's also a pretty calm personality. Mm-hmm. So she'll be a steady hand at that tiller as well.
Mm-hmm. And talk about Bay of Quinte tourism. That's been a new thing for Brighton.
Yeah, we've gone down that road with Doug and the gang at the Bay of Quinte, and Doug and his team are incredible to work with, and we're pleased to have Bay of Quinte back on board. Now,
Brighton has worked with other regional partners in very close ways before, like QEDC. So, that's something where Brighton has been there with Quinte West and Belford for quite some time. Do you think this Bay of Quinte tourism approach helps augment that?
Absolutely. QEDC is our manufacturing
mm-hmm.
economic driver, and Bay of Quinte is our tourism and housing economic driver. So those two things in the mix, you add the Northumberland County Economic Development Team and our own local economic development team, and we're getting there.
Mm-hmm. So Paul, sorry Paul.
Go ahead.
Are you going to have Apple Fest? That's part of tourism. I know it's early, but
So there's the other thing. No one wanted to be the mayor who canceled Apple Fest twice,
yeah,
right?
I know. Ooh, ouch.
Right? Ouch.
But what are the odds of it happening this September?
I think pretty good. Mm-hmm. Now, we came down for Apple Fest. We heard about this Apple Fest thing. We came down for Apple Fest, and we came down the next week and started looking for a house. That's the kind of thing that an Apple Fest does for a community like Brighton. So to cancel it, heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. Painfully heartbreaking. And this is our premier event. Mm-hmm. And I had to concur with the Apple Fest team that we couldn't do it. That's heartbreaking, but it was the right thing to do. Sure. It was the right thing to do.
But this year you're pretty confident it's going to go ahead.
I think if it doesn't, there'd be something seriously wrong.
With COVID, you don't know.
You don't know. But I'm certainly
You're
hopeful.
Optimistic.
I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful, and I know the team's planning for it.
Another big draw for Brighton, of course, is Presqu'île Provincial Park. There have been some parking issues there and some other things, but what is the status of it, and how great has it been to still have use of the outdoor areas there, especially when so many things have been restricted?
The Presqu'île is the jewel, a jewel in the Northumberland County treasure chest, not just in Brighton's, but we have a really good working relationship with the superintendent. Of course, our member of provincial parliament is now the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks, so that's certainly helpful to get us on the map or highlighted on the map. The first year of COVID, we struggled with parking, as you know, but the park staff struggled with people coming in and what they were doing. Mm-hmm. People's behavior was just bizarre. It was just bizarre. So we quickly moved to create no parking zones for people's safety, and the province tried to pivot very quickly and create a staggered system of who could enter and let people know in advance so they're not driving an hour and a half or 2 hours, getting there, and suddenly the park's closed due to capacity. Because then what do you do? Mm-hmm. Well, you park on the side of the road.
Are you talking about the reservation system?
Yeah.
Now, Quinte West, we talked about Quinte West. Quinte West has a slogan, Quinte West is the best.
Yes.
As Jim always says. Is there an equivalent slogan for Brighton? Brighton is brilliant.
Brighton's moderately better. I don't know.
Let's workshop that one a little bit. Okay. So, did you have no one got to do a New Year's message. I mean, you haven't scripted anything, but what is the message that you want to get out to people? Because 2021 was tough.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a tough year right across the board. And in addition to, for example, having to cancel Applefest, rearrange the Christmas parade, Santa Claus parade, you didn't get the chance to really deliver that message in the same way. So this is your chance. What message would you want to get across to the people of Brighton?
So 2020, January 1st, 2020, yeah. I'm standing at the podium in the robes and the chains, and I end my speech with welcome to our roaring 20s. Right? Well, I had no idea, right? I had no idea what that was going to mean. But I certainly didn't expect it would mean that we'd shut everything down. So two and a half months later, we're shut down, and Roaring 20s had a whole other context.
Roaring stop. Will the current situation have an impact on how many people run? I mean, it's been a tough time. So if ever there was a stark look at what it means to be a municipal government, it's been now. Do you think that will hurt the number of people who run for Brighton Council in the fall?
Good question. I think what maybe brought a lot of people out in the last couple of terms has been concerns over what's happening around the table, and maybe they could do it better, or maybe they can support whoever's at the head, or whatever that particular concern is, because we've had robust slates of candidates for council in particular. We'll see what calming the waters have done, and whether we can keep those waters calm over
So very quickly, how many councillors are on Brighton's council?
So we have 5 members of council, a mayor and a deputy mayor.
Thank you so much, Brian. Of course, municipal elections are coming up in the fall and provincial election coming up in June. This has been Beyond the Politics with Brighton Mayor Brian Ostrander.